question. Sorry, Abel. Discernible wanted to talk to me, but hold on.
Oh, yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, what was your gripes with my view? You said something that, oh, there was a time before perspectives or minds existed, so therefore I can't say anything about science or something like that, don't it? Right.
Yeah, so basic claim is that, like, when a physicist makes a claim about the world before perspectives existed, that if then I think that what you have to say they're doing is they're saying that this rock is 4 billion years old for humans, right? Like, did we agree on that before?
Yeah, you said something. Okay, yeah, you said something. They have to. So what you're trying to say here is that the scientists have to qualify their sentences. Okay, is
Yeah,
that
right,
what you
exactly.
said? Right, right. But my point here is that it's okay. So let me put it this way. I agree that okay. I agree that this okay. So just to be clear, I'm not taking relativism to be. So first of so I'm a relativist in the sense that I think that truth is dependent on perspective or framework. So what I would say here is that rather than saying that the scientists have to say that it is true for humans, they would have to say that it is okay. So they would have to say that it's true for us, of course, but I would say it would be true relative to our perspective. But notice that I don't take perspective and humans to be the same thing. So like I'm separating perspectives from humans. Okay, so that's the first thing. So yeah, I guess the scientists have to say well they're going to agree that it is true relative to a particular perspective. They will accept that, but it's not like anytime when they are speaking they have to always qualify their sentence with it is X is true relative to perspective Y. You see what I mean? Like they've already granted that. You know, like they've already established. They don't have to add that because they just take relativism to be true. You see what I mean? Like I don't have to constantly qualify my sentences with like relative qualifiers. I guess
It can be
the point I'm
silently
trying to
done.
make here. Sure, I guess you could say silently done, but the point is that like I think that this type of like argument only works because the person who is an absolutist or the non-relativist or objectivist, sometimes it's called invariantist, whatever, about truth, is saying something like they're presuming this like absolutist notion of truth where but then the relativists can do the same thing because the relativists can say, well, for every sentence that's like someone who is an objectivist makes, they will have to say that X is true objectively. And then, but once they make that sentence there, that hasn't expressed their view, so they're going to have to add that X is true objectively, and then this is just going to form an infinite regress. So I think the point you're trying to make here is that is it that the infinite regress objection you're trying to present against relativism, or are you just making like a more different criticism? I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's not an infinite regress thing, and it's not that every statement needs to be qualified either way. The point would be that qualifying statements about a world before perspectives, um, like strips them of sense or interest, because it's to describe a world before perspective, uh, using a perspective, right, is retrojecting your perspective back into that world, and you're no longer describing the world the way you mean to.
But wait, what? Oh, so you're saying okay? So you're trying to say something else, but on a relativist perspective, the past is itself relative. so like that's the entire point of the relativist. So it's like there's not going to be an objective past. So I'm not seeing what's the issue. Like, what do you like when you say it's not describing the past as it actually is, or something like that, like as if there's some like actual, like again, on my view as a constructivist, I'm going to just deny that there is like something like an objective or non-relative past or history.
Do you think
So
the
I don't see.
perspective is eternal?
Do
Like,
I think the
like Christians
perspective?
will say that God is an eternal observer.
Sure. Okay. So I think that eternal and absolute are not the same thing or objective. So like something could be true for all time relative to a particular perspective. But notice that if you change the perspective, it no longer becomes, it's relative. You see what I mean? So like I think that the facts can change. So if something could be true for all of time, you get what I mean? But then if we change the perspective, it's no longer true. Like maybe it was once true, for example, that the earth was flat for all time. Maybe that was a truth one time, but if the truth changes, then that's not going to be an issue. You see what I mean for relativists? Does that make sense?
Talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the object changing.
I'm saying it's not good. Is the object changing? Yeah, I guess the object would be changing, of course. No, I'm not saying that the Earth was flat. Maybe, to be honest, I don't know. Maybe the Earth was flat at in. Okay, so what? Yeah, yeah. The object might be changing. The truth changes. So reality changes. So I guess.
So does truth being relative change?
Yeah, I guess it would change, but of course we're not in that particular perspective. Of course, like maybe one day absolutism would be true. You know what I mean?
So
Well,
like,
yeah,
like
but
all
even
of our claims, they're relative to a framework accessible to humans, right? Like we don't make claims about frameworks not accessible to humans or from
Sure,
frameworks not accessible to humans.
sure.
And like the human perspective uh, uh, did not exist 4 billion years ago, presumably.
It didn't. It didn't. Like when you said the human perspective, okay, no, that's what you're catching me. So the human perspective existed 4 billion years ago. Like we projected it back into the past 4 billion years ago, but humans never existed because remember I'm making a distinction between humans and humans perspective. You see
Right.
what I'm saying?
So yeah, but yeah, we can make a distinction between projecting back and saying it exists. Like we're not projecting back when we talk about the human perspective now, right? In the present.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying no. We can only talk about something relative to now. Like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like we're talking about the past. No, like the past. No, like yeah. It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Yeah. So when a physicist talks about the world 4 billion years ago, they are not talking about a world without a human perspective in it because they're projecting their human perspective back into it.
Well, yeah. Again, I guess yeah. If you're just saying that, yeah, the past itself is just going to be, yeah, it's going to be filtered through a perspective. Sure. Like I'm, not, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but that's par for the course for a relativist. A relativist is going to say that history itself is also constructed. So I don't see a problem with that.
Well, I mean, human history is going to be constructed um, like within a time in which human perspective exists, right? Like, sure, there's a relation
Sure.
between the object and the perspective.
But by the way, I'm not just limiting construction to just human beings. Maybe other organisms also construct the past or reality or whatever. So it's not like we're special in this. I'm just saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I picked 4 billion years ago because it's prior to life.
Right. Of course, this is a unique view. I guess. I think so. I don't. Did I tell you this discernible? Maybe you didn't hear this, but I wanted to tell you something. So there is like two forms of like imprecision or like inexactness. Like I would say that they are like there is a trade-off. What I mean is that there's a trade-off between two of them. So like imagine there is a person called John. Okay, John is 6 feet. Okay, now we could say John to be 6 feet precisely. Like he's precisely 6 feet tall. Okay, but if you think about this, no one is actually 6 feet precisely, because if you were to like zoom up on their hair, like the boundaries between the atoms, electrons don't even have a definite position. You know what I mean? So it's going to be false that John is 6 feet precisely. You know what I mean? So notice that. Yeah, so that's just going to be a false statement. So we might say, well, John is 6 feet approximately. But notice there that what we've done here is that we've said that we've not said that John is 6 feet precisely. We've just said it's approximately the case. So notice that we've traded one type of like imprecision for another type of imprecision. So you can't get rid of imprecision either way. You notice that? Okay, so does that make sense? Or maybe you didn't get that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah. So what I would say here is this: when we are trying to measure John's height, well, when we say John's height, there is actually nothing that refers to that, because there is no fact for what John's height is. That doesn't refer to anything. In fact, John, when we say John, that also doesn't refer to anything. Okay. So what we have to do first is we have to construct a classification scheme in which John exists, and then of course John's height so exists in that classification. So once we construct this classification scheme, that classification scheme will carve out the object of John, like the boundaries. We have to first set the boundaries for where John's height and so on, and then we can just like measure John's height. But notice there that, so by creating that classification scheme, we carve out the object John, and then after that, we measure his height. And then that's what I would do for all objects, basically. So that's basically the idea I'm saying. We would construct John basically by measuring him in some sense. You know what I mean? Or something like that. But yeah. That's I think that's what I'm pointing out, and we do this for everything basically. So yeah.
Oh, so like you don't take like your perspectivalism to be a kind of idealism?
Do I take it to be a type of idealism? I guess the reason why I said the reason why I say I'm an idealist is not because I'm actually an idealist. It's just because anytime when people talk about when I say it's from a particular perspective or framework, they just think of that as idealism. So I just say, well, yeah, I'm an idealist. But it's not like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's not actually idealism. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Okay, because like I would have taken like what you've said about the way we come up with the claim that John is tall. I would have taken perspectivalism to be a kind of idealism that's interested in the logical conditions or the transcendental conditions of us being able to do that in the first place. Like, what's the relation between the perspective and the object that allows us to even try and figure out how tall he is?
Sure, and I'm saying that you can't even say so. Yeah, it is that. But you didn't listen to what I'm saying. I said that. Yeah, what's the relationship? Yeah, that's why I said there is no John there, because when I say John, that doesn't refer to anything. We have to first construct a classification scheme. So, or maybe you did hear that, but I'm just misunderstanding what you're saying. Yeah, you did hear that. I'm just misunderstanding. Well, what am I misunderstanding, by the way?
Well, like the process of getting to John is not like a like. Do you think it's like a conscious reasoning process?
Oh yeah, I think is it. Yeah, I think that it's a conscious reasoning process. Yeah, but of course, once we've constructed that theory or framework, then it's there. Like we don't have to think about it again. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe I just thought you've been talking about something different, right? Because like usually, like I'm familiar when people talk about perspective, they're talking about a set of logical conditions for experiencing the world. So,
Sure.
like a really quick example of this is that imagine in your mind your funeral. Yeah. So you see the person, or you hear the person giving the eulogy, blah blah blah. Now, importantly, you're not actually there. You're dead. But you're imagining things in space. You're imagining things in time. Um, the logical conditions of your perspective are present in the image, and what's present in the image, what's present inside the image, like your perspective is there, right? You can see the person giving the eulogy. You're supposed to be
Mhm.
dead, but your perspective is present in the image.
I see. Yeah, yeah. By perspective here, I just mean any symbolic representation. Just you know what I mean. Uh, like what I'm saying here is like so when we say something means, I'm talking about meaning here. I think like when you say, okay, John's height, what does that refer to? You know what I mean? Well, technically, it doesn't refer to anything because the only way that can refer to anything is if you already have a classification scheme in which John height is. Because again, I told you about the two forms of like inexactness or imprecision, that you can have, and you can't get rid of them. You see what I mean? So you first have to have a classification scheme in which the object John exists, because even John, when you say John, that doesn't refer to anything. You get what I mean? You have to first establish this like classification scheme in which John exists, and then John's height will come from that, and then you can say, well, okay, well, look, you measure John's height there. You know what I mean? So that's my point I'm trying to make. So you said something about logical conditions. That's what you said.
Yeah. So like experience requires
Right.
a relation to space and time. When you imagine your funeral, you imagine the sequence of events, right? You can't have experience. You can't have a perspective without these things.
Mm. Oh, you're talking about something like Kant's transcendental categories or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not interesting. The thing about me is that I believe in what Kant says, but I don't think that there is any necessary categories. So I don't think that space and time are necessary because I'm a relativist. I guess I could believe that, but
Are they
I don't
not
know.
necessary for a human perspective? Because like a Christian
Are
will say,
they-
of course, God doesn't need these things, right?
Right. I actually don't know if they're necessary. I'm actually maybe they are, but I don't believe they are. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm agnostic. Yeah.
You
So,
wouldn't
so yeah. So discernible. I think that there might be some people who can experience like spaceless experience. I don't think that I can't wanted to have these necessary categories for the experience or whatever, but presumably I think there's people who do drugs and have spaceless and timeless experience. At least I've heard something similar to that. So
If they
I
had
mean
a
I agree.
timeless experience, they wouldn't be able to remember it.
Yeah,
They might,
well I don't know.
remember it
I
very,
haven't had one,
they
so I
might
can't tell
remember it
you.
very acutely, actually.
What's that?
Remember it very acutely.
Yeah, but then you just
Some
remember the
pe-
sequence of events. If there's no sequence of events, what's the memory?
But you're talking about taking drugs now, right?
Yeah. Like what's that? What's the memory going to be of if there is no sequence of events?
Well, it's not necessarily that there aren't any sequence of events. What I'd encourage you to watch is a drug taking experience that is something perhaps a bit different from what we'd usually accept as a drug taking experience. It's I think it's from the 1950s. It's by the BBC. A member of the House of Lords takes LSD with a psychiatrist, and it's filmed by the BBC, and they talk to each other for like an hour. It's a very strange piece of television.
Yeah, I
and
would
it
guarantee
really,
that person
and
was
it,
not
and it,
was not
Sorry, go-
experiencing no time.
I mean, your objective experience of it is going to be your objective experience of it, and it would be very similar to mine. I didn't think that time changed because he'd taken a mushroom.
No, I'm not saying time can't change.
However, it would be a very interesting. I think it's very informative to watch this interaction, which is a very unusual drug interaction.
Yeah, I've taken drugs before, right, but I remember the experience and I remember a sequence of events.
Sure.
And
Okay.
the important thing is, if there was no sequence of events, like if there wasn't one perceived, there'd be no memory of it.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, if there was no sequence of events, then it would just be perceived as like it wouldn't even be a moment, right? There would be nothing you could point at in your memory and say, that's what happened.
I don't think that's how memory works. I mean, there's two ways, and correct me if I'm wrong. So if you took a drug and you didn't remember what happened, that would be one thing. Or if you took a drug and then you fell into some sort of stupor state and then imagined things that didn't happen, that would be another.
Mm-hmm.
Now, neither of those things would have any impact on time or space, of course.
Not on physics.
They'd just be. I mean, they would have an impact on physics, wouldn't they? Because it affect your brain and how you perceive things, and you are physics.
Yeah, like drugs can't affect transcendental conditions. It's just two different things.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
You're really sure about that?
I mean, it's just definitional to what a transcendental condition is, right? It's a logical condition of experience.
Transcendental, so is something about perceiving different planes of reality, isn't it? That's what that means.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Transcendental is something about perceiving different planes of reality.
No,
whatever that means.
Experience, right? Like I gave the example of, you can imagine your funeral, right?
Sure.
And you can hear the person giving the eulogy. You see stuff, blah blah blah.
I can imagine it. Yeah.
And to do all that, you have to have, like, the people in the funeral, they have to have spatial relations, and the eulogy, it has to be one word after another, etc. You can't imagine your funeral without space and time.
Right. Yeah. So I have to imagine it in the future. I hope this isn't my funeral, is it?
Yeah, it's just space and time.
I'm not dead already, am I? Okay.
Yeah. So
I can imagine future events that haven't happened, or I can imagine things. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And you can't imagine them without that.
Without what?
Without conditions like space and time.
Oh, so it has to be in the future because I'm alive now.
No, I mean, the person giving the eulogy says sedative mercury was right? That's three separate moments. You can't imagine a eulogy where the person says, Sedative Mercury was a nice guy, without separate moments, right? Try to imagine it without separate moments. You're not going to hear a sentence.
Don't they all flow into one or something? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Why are you taking me into a point in the future? It's definitely going to happen. I mean, they're probably not going to bother to have a funeral for me. They'll just
think about
stuff. They'll just stuff me into the backfield and hope the cows eat me. I'm
it
pretty
doesn't
sure
have to be
about
the
that.
future. It can be now, right? Like you're listening to
But
my
I'm
words,
not-
and each word has to be in a separate moment. Otherwise, it would be gibberish.
Right. So, okay. So, an existential sort of thing. So we constantly. No, I don't think you're saying that actually. So I'm not going to go there. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Hmm?
So things happen in order.
We experience things as happening in order, yeah, and we cannot
Yeah.
but do that.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed that. So what do you mean?
What's the point of saying that?
Yeah, exactly. What is the point of
it's the
saying that?
necessary. It's like the necessary structure of a human perspective.
That's one point of perspective, right? But there are
other kinds of perspectives.
there are other ones, isn't it? Which can be interesting, which is why I encourage you to watch the.
No, this would be necessary for experience at all.
Yeah, including a drugged up experience.
No, hang on. If you don't experience things necessarily in the way that you're used to, do we say, a shorthand for this, I would posit rather trite explanation of, yes, we tend to experience things in order and
it's not that we tend to; it's impossible to do otherwise.
Predict. No, but not everyone does all the time, and you don't all the time either. You really don't.
Do.
You are giving yourself a little too much discredit there with that. It is a little bit more fluctuant than that, genuinely. But there's something very interesting, and I wouldn't say.
You can try it for yourself.
I wouldn't say revolution, revealing, and I wouldn't say desirable about taking hallucinogenic drugs. But there is something different that happens when people do experience that.
Yeah, and the condition of them remembering the experience is that it was a spatiotemporal experience.